What is up, YouTube? It's Anderson977 here today to do JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Episode 11 review, Stardust Crusaders. And in this episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, it's a continuation from what happened last week, right? So we basically pick up right where we left off. Whole Horse was talking crap to Polnareff, trying to bring him out, calling him Pol Con, and all of these remarks to kind of get on his nerves for him to come at him, for him to attack, because once he would do that, then Centerfold and him would team up and try to take out Polnareff. But Kakyouin was there trying to get Polnareff to hold off and keep it together, and we see that it took some convincing from Kakyouin, and it took him a while, but he eventually got through to Polnareff. And once he did, we see Polnareff say, "Alright, that's it. I'll walk away for now." Then we see Centerfold appear to him in the mirror, and again with the mirrors, we see Hangman appear and held Polnareff on his shoulder, while at the same time Whole Horse was taking out his gun to shoot him, and Kakyouin jumped in, used Emerald Splash, shot him up, and then got in the van, grabbed it by, grabbed his hand and saved him, right? And then we finally get an explanation or breakdown of Centerfold's abilities. So in regards to Centerfold abilities, right, we finally get to see it for what it is. Centerfold's stand, Hangman, is not a stand that exists out in the quote-unquote natural world or the real world. It exists inside reflections, right? So it travels at the speed of light from reflection to reflection. It travels at the speed of light from reflection to reflection, back and forth, and it exists inside these reflections. If these reflections are destroyed, it gets destroyed. So they basically end up how Polnareff ended up striking him in the first place, and discovering this for the first time was when they were driving, and then there was a reflection of Hangman in the steering wheel of the van, and then they tried to dodge and get around that, and Polnareff drew out his stand and cut up the steering wheel into pieces, and then they went out and hid away from all possible reflections, right? And at this point I might add that ability for his stand to exist inside reflections, that's a pretty impressive ability if you think about it, because I mean most things in the modern day, the modern day devices and appliances, right, most things are reflective. So if you are a character from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and let's say you have a stand that basically lives inside reflections and attacks inside reflections, etc., that's a very powerful place to come from. From a stand user ability standpoint, that's a very impressive and powerful ability. And we even see that Centerfold, he knows his stand weaknesses, right? He knows all about them, and so he's devised means and countermeasures that he can use to get his stand to operate to the best of its ability, as we see later on in this episode with the people who came to Polnareff and Kakyouin for money. But as I was saying, back onto the point, so we see all of a sudden Polnareff begin to realize that there's a beam of light moving from the mirror reflections on the ground, and lo and behold, it figured out that it's moving through the reflections, right? And then he figured out that the stand is moving from the reflections. Then we see this kid coming over to them and asking them what's up. He went into the kid's eye from the reflection, and then was using that to get to them, and all of a sudden we see Polnareff do something kind of dirty, throws dirt into the kid's eye. So Polnareff uses that opportunity to strike at the beam at the instant when Hangman was trying to transfer from the kid's eye straight to his own eye, and he anticipated that the Hangman would go to his own eye because that would be the only reflection place for him to go into. So he used that strike and damaged Hangman. So that's how they figured out Centerfold's weakness. And then later on we see they try to pinpoint Centerfold's relocation, but they were tricked, and they actually saw a normal guy that was injured by Centerfold when Centerfold threw that knife into Polnareff's back. He calls over a couple Indian people and say, hey, they've got money, and then all of them coming over, which is pretty smart because now he has them to use, their eyes to use as reflections for him, for his stand to move through easily. And we see that that's the case. Hangman begins slicing them up and all that, and then all of a sudden Kakyouin gets the idea to, hey, use a gold coin, throw it up into the air. When everybody gets focused at the coin, everybody's looking at one direction, they use that to pinpoint Hangman's relocation within this person's eye, and then throw this into that guy's eye so that he will be forced out into another reflective area, and then boom, he was struck and Hangman was done with. So they came after Centerfold and they eventually got rid of him too. So I'm actually pretty surprised that this whole fight and this whole standoff between them and Centerfold actually went down in just one episode. I was beginning to think that it will be something much more monumental, but I guess as we see that Centerfold and Whole Horse, two of them together work most impressively and most best as a team. And we even see Whole Horse say this about himself in this episode, that he himself, he works best in terms of team settings. Without a team, he's pretty much not that impressive at all. And then yeah, so that's basically all the major points for this episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. But what I will say though is that towards the end of this episode, right when they were going to get rid of Whole Horse as well, we see that same girl, that Indian girl that was after Whole Horse in the previous episode, she jumped in and saved him. And right when Polnareff was trying to go after Whole Horse and the girl was dragging on Polnareff's leg, scraping her elbow on the ground and getting damage, right at that point when Jotaro's grandfather came over, he used a cloth to wrap around the wound. We see this kind of blood spot just jump and plop onto Jotaro's grandfather's arm, right? And towards the very end of this episode, we see this, that it turns out looks like this sort of pimple on his arm, and that will be another progression for the other coming episode. But all in all, this was a pretty decent episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It was pretty impactful, it was pretty solid, and we get a full explanation of Centerfold's abilities. Again, as I said in my review last week, that his stand works off reflections, and we see how true it is in this episode. So that's it, that's my review. Remember to rate, comment, subscribe. Sayonara.